The rain-slicked asphalt of Elmwood Avenue gleamed under the sodium lamps, turning the night into a blurred watercolor of shadows and fury. It was just past midnight in the forgotten outskirts of Riverton, where the hum of distant traffic mixed with the ragged breaths of a crowd that had gathered like moths to a flame. At the center of it all, a man in a rumpled trench coat, badge glinting on his belt like a false promise, swung wildly at two younger guys who dared to intervene. His face was twisted in rage, veins bulging as he bellowed slurs that echoed off the brick walls of the shuttered storefronts. But it wasn't the fight that turned stomachs. It was the woman cowering nearby, her dress torn at the shoulder, arms wrapped around herself, as if holding in the pieces of a shattered evening. She was Joanne Pierce, though no one there knew her name yet. Only that her eyes, wide with terror, pleaded for the world to look away. The brawl had erupted from nothing, or so it seemed, a spilled drink at the corner bar spilling over into accusations, then shoves, then fists. The cop, Sergeant Harlan Pierce, had been the instigator, his uniform off-duty but his authority a weapon he wielded like a club. One of the young men hit the ground hard, blood mixing with the puddles, while the other backed away, hands raised. Harlan advanced, unyielding, his breath reeking of whiskey even from 10 feet away. The crowd murmured uneasy. Folks who knew better than to cross a badge, especially one as volatile as his. Joanne's voice cracked through the din, a desperate "Harlan, please!" But it only fueled him, his boot coming down inches from the fallen man's hand. That's when the rumble started low, like thunder rolling in from the industrial yards beyond. A single headlight pierced the haze first, then another, cutting through the rain like knives. Brett Sable Hart rode at the front, his black leather jacket scarred from 1,000 miles of blacktop. The iron promise patch on his back faded but fierce, a symbol of oaths sworn in blood and chrome. He wasn't looking for trouble. He'd been heading home after a long haul, the scent of diesel and wet earth clinging to his beard, but the scene unfolded like a bad dream he couldn't ignore. The cop's brutality, the woman's silent scream. Brett killed the engine with a flick of his wrist, the sudden silence amplifying the grunts and splashes. He dismounted in one fluid motion, boots splashing, his presence alone parting the crowd like a stone through water. No words at first. Just the weight of his stare, the broad shoulders that spoke of battles won without fanfare. Harlan turned, squinting through the downpour, his fist still clenched. "This ain't your business, biker trash," he snarled, stepping forward as if the badge made him invincible. Brett didn't flinch. He moved between them, not with a punch, but with the calm authority of someone who'd stared down worse than a drunk enforcer. His hand clamped on Harlan's shoulder, not hard, but firm enough to halt the swing mid-air. "Walk away," Brett said, voice low and gravelly, carrying the timbre of desert winds and forgotten promises. The young men scrambled back, the crowd holding its breath. Harlan shrugged him off, chest heaving, but something in Brett's eyes, the quiet storm of a man who'd lost too much to back down, made him hesitate. For a heartbeat. The rain was the only sound, pattering on helmets and hoods. Joanne seized the moment, darting forward through the slick street. Her hand gripped Brett's arm, fingers trembling but urgent, nails digging in like anchors. She pulled him close, her whisper cutting sharper than any shout. "He's my husband, and he's a cop. He won't stop." The words hung between them, laced with a desperation that twisted Brett's gut. He'd seen it before, the badge that shielded monsters, the system that devoured the vulnerable. Joanne's face, pale and streaked with rain, told a story of months, maybe years, of bruises hidden under sleeves and smiles. Her eyes searched his, not for a savior, but for a witness, someone who wouldn't turn it into spectacle. Brett nodded once, imperceptibly his mind already racing. He wasn't one for headlines or heroics. The Iron Promise creed was simpler. You keep your word, you protect your own, even if they weren't born to you. Harlan lunged again, but Brett sidestepped, guiding the cop back with a subtle shove that sent him stumbling into a lamppost. "Go cool off," Brett said, louder now for the crowd's sake. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had called it in, and the bystanders began to scatter. Joanne clung to the shadows as Harlan righted himself, cursing under his breath, his gaze promising retribution. But Brett stood his ground, blocking the path, his bike a silent sentinel behind him. As the first patrol car crested the hill, lights flashing blue and red across the wet pavement, Brett felt the weight of an old vow stir in his chest. Years ago, in the dust-choked aftermath of a desert convoy gone wrong, he'd promised a fallen brother to never look away from the broken. This woman, this fractured night, it was a call he couldn't refuse. He glanced at Joanne, her whisper echoing, "He won't stop." Neither would he. Not until the scales tipped towards something resembling justice, even if it meant riding against the wind. The officers piled out, barking orders, their eyes narrowing at Brett's cut. Harlan straightened his coat, flashing his badge like a shield. "This guy's assaulting an officer," he lied smoothly, pointing at Brett. Joanne froze, her breath catching, but Brett met the new arrival's stares without blinking. "Just breaking up a party," he replied evenly. Hands visible, voice steady. The rain intensified, drumming on metal and skin, washing away the blood but not the tension. One cop, a younger one with doubt in his eyes, glanced at Joanne, then back. "Ma'am, you okay?" She nodded too quickly, words failing her. Brett saw the trap closing, the brotherhood of blue, the unwritten code that protected its own. As they cuffed the young men for disturbance, ignoring Harlan's disheveled state, Brett's resolve hardened. He wouldn't drag her into the light, not yet. But as he mounted his bike, engine growling back to life, he caught her gaze one last time. A silent pact formed in that look. He'd find a way, quiet and true, to make the whispers heard. The convoy he'd left behind at the edge of town, his iron promise brothers waiting on word, would ride if he called. But this demanded more than thunder. It demanded patience, the kind forged in loss, to unravel a knot tied by power and fear. As the taillights of the patrol cars faded into the night, Brett throttled forward, the road ahead a ribbon of uncertainty. Joanne watched him go, a spark of hope flickering in the storm, proof that some promises, once kept, could change the tide. The neon sign of the rusty anchor flickered like a dying heartbeat against the relentless downpour, casting erratic pools of red and blue across the parking lot, where Brett's sable heart pulled his Harley to a stop. The engine's growl faded into the night's symphony of rain on gravel and the distant wail of sirens that still echoed from Elmwood Avenue. His gloves, slick with water, creaked as he flexed his fingers, the chill seeping through his leather like an unwelcome memory. Brett wasn't one to dwell on chance encounters, but Joanne's whisper clung to him heavier than the storm clouds overhead. "He's my husband, and he's a cop. He won't stop." It wasn't just words, it was a fracture in the armor of a world that pretended justice wore a badge. He killed the lights, leaning the bike against a weathered post, and scanned the lot. A few rigs from his Iron Promise crew dotted the edges, big bikes with custom pipes that hummed low when idled, their riders nursing beers inside the dive bar that served as their unofficial way station on the outskirts of Riverton. The club wasn't about chaos, it was forged in the fires of old wars, where men like him had buried brothers under desert sands and sworn oaths that outlasted the scars. Brett had ridden solo tonight, chasing the solitude of open road after a delivery run that left him bone-tired. But now the pull was undeniable. He needed eyes, ears, kin who understood that some fights weren't won with fists, but with the quiet unraveling of lies. Pushing through the door, the warmth hit him like a wall, the scent of stale smoke, fried onions, and spilled ale mingling with the low murmur of voices. Jukebox crooned a gravelly blues tune, the kind that spoke of lost highways and second chances. At the corner booth, under the haze of a hanging lamp, sat Jax Forge Ramirez, his vice patch gleaming on a vest patched with road dust. Jax was a veteran like Brett, broad-shouldered with a limp from a roadside IED that never slowed him down. Beside him, Lena Sparrow Torres nursed a soda, ex-military medic turned club enforcer, her sharp eyes missing nothing. They looked up as Brett approached, the booth creaking under his weight as he slid in. "Trouble on the avenue?" Jax rumbled, sliding an untouched whiskey across the scarred table. His face, lined like cracked leather, held the easy calm of someone who'd stared down death and chosen loyalty over glory. Brett took the glass, the amber liquid burning a path down his throat, chasing the rain's cold. More than trouble. Cop, off duty, drunk, starting a brawl over nothing, had a woman caught in it, his wife. He paused, the word hanging heavy, and met their gazes. She's scared. Says he won't stop. Saw the signs, marks under her sleeve, the way she flinched. Badge or not, he's poison. Lena leaned forward, her braid falling over one shoulder, fingers drumming the table like Morse code for unease. You pull him off? Witnesses? Enough to scatter, not enough for cuffs. Brett's voice stayed even, but his jaw tightened, the memory of Harlan's sneer flashing like lightning. Patrol showed. He flipped it, called me the aggressor. They bought it mostly. Young one looked doubtful, but the code's thick. She nodded them off, played the part. But her eyes, they were screaming for out. Jax nodded slowly, swirling his beer. The club had rules. No entangling with law, unless it crossed the line into the personal, the promised. But Brett's history ran deep. A sister lost to a system that turned blind eyes, a vow etched in his mind from a hospital bedside years back. You calling the ride? Jax asked, meaning the full muster, the thunder of engines that could shake a town awake. Not yet, this one's quiet. Need to map it first. Dig without dragging her under. Brett's mind raced ahead. Harlan Pierce, sergeant in Riverton's underbelly, whispers of complaints buried in precinct drawers. The Iron Promise had contacts, mechanics who fixed cop cruisers, bartenders who overheard shifts. Lena, you still got that nurse friend at the clinic, the one who sees the walk-ins. She nodded, a ghost of a smile breaking through. Mara. She patches up more than cuts, listens to stories that don't make reports. I'll reach out, discreet. The conversation wove like smoke, plans forming in fragments, tales on Harlan's shifts, alibis for Brett's movements, a safe house on the club's edge if Joanne needed bolt. No bravado, just the steady rhythm of men and women who'd chosen family over bloodlines, honoring debts that time couldn't erase. Outside, the rain eased to a drizzle, the lot's puddles reflecting the bar's glow like shattered mirrors. Brett felt the old promise stir again, the one from Sunbaked Sands, where he'd held a dying friend's hand and sworn to stand for the voiceless. This wasn't glory, it was duty, the kind that carved you hollow if ignored. As the clock ticked past 1, a phone buzzed on the table, Jax's burner, the one for shadows. He answered low, brow furrowing. Yeah. When? Copy. Hanging up, he met Brett's stare. Patrol just dropped the young bucks from the fight, no charges. Harlan's riding shotgun in the lead car, heading east. Toward the precinct, looks like. Brett stood, the chair scraping like a warning. He's covering tracks already. The air thickened with unspoken resolve. Joanne's face lingered in his mind, pale, resolute, a woman teetering on the edge of breaking free. He wouldn't let the system swallow her whole. Mounting his bike minutes later, the engine's roar cut the quiet Jax and Lena flanking him as they rolled out into the mist-shrouded streets. The road curved toward the precinct's distant lights, a beacon of false security. Brett's headlight sliced the dark, illuminating the path ahead, not to storm gates, but to watch, wait, and weave the first threads of truth. They parked in the shadow of an overpass, engines off, the night's hush broken only by dripping eaves and the occasional whoosh of passing semis. Through binoculars, the precinct loomed, squat brick building with floodlights bathing the lot in harsh white. Harlan's cruiser pulled in, doors slamming as he laughed with his partner, the earlier rage masked like a shed skin. No sign of Joanne, tucked away perhaps in some shadowed apartment where walls held secrets. Brett's grip tightened on the wheel. Patience was his weapon now, forged in losses that taught him haste only fed the beasts. Hours blurred in vigil, the cold seeping deeper until a side door swung open. A figure emerged, Joanne, bundled in a too large coat, Harlan's arm possessive around her shoulders. She walked stiffly, head down, but as the cruiser idled, she glanced toward the overpass as if sensing eyes in the dark. Brett held his breath. In that fleeting moment her gaze locked on the shadows, a silent acknowledgement. Harlan barked something, shoving her toward the car, and she complied. But the spark was there, defiance kindled. As they drove off, taillights fading into the labyrinth of side streets, Brett fired up his bike. "We follow, slow, no lights." The trio melted into the night, guardians unseen, the promise binding them tighter than chains. This was the beginning of the unraveling, not with thunder but with the steady drip of revelation, eroding the foundations of corruption one truth at a time. Joanne's whisper had ignited it. Now the iron promise would fan the flame, quiet and unyielding, until justice breathed free. And now I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The mist clung to the streets like a shroud as Brett Sableheart trailed the cruiser at a phantom's distance, his Harley's engine throttled to a whisper, tires slicing silently through the sheen of leftover rain. Jax rode point, a shadow weaving between parked cars and alley mouths, while Lena brought up the rear, her bike's low profile blending with the urban sprawl of Riverton's sleeping neighborhoods. The air carried the faint tang of wet concrete and distant exhaust, a reminder that the city never truly rested, only paused, waiting for the next fracture. Harlan's taillights bobbed ahead like false stars, leading them deeper into a grid of modest homes where porch lights flickered like wary eyes. Joanne sat rigid in the passenger seat, her silhouette etched against the glow of passing street lamps, a prisoner in her own life. Brett's mind churned with the fragments of the night. The cop's whiskey-fueled rage, the wife's whispered plea, the badger's unyielding shield. He'd seen echoes of this before, in the hollow stares of veterans who'd traded battlefields for home-front wars, where the real enemies wore familiar faces. The iron promise wasn't built on vengeance. It was stitched from the threads of oaths that survived sandstorms and betrayals. Tonight, that creed pulled him forward, a gravitational force against the pull of exhaustion. They crested a gentle rise, the cruiser turning into a driveway, lined with overgrown hedges. The house, a squat bungalow, with peeling paint and a single bulb, burning over the door like a sentinel's lantern. The engine cut as Harlan killed his own, the sudden quiet amplifying the drip of water from eaves and the rustle of leaves in the breeze. He emerged first, broad shoulders rolling as he scanned the street with the paranoia of a man who knew his secrets had edges. Joanne followed slower, her steps measured, the coat swallowing her frame as she clutched a small purse like a lifeline. Brett watched from the mouth of a side street, binoculars steady, heart pounding a slow rhythm against his ribs. Harlan's hand grazed her arm, not gentle, but possessive, guiding her up the cracked walk with words lost to the distance. The door clicked shut behind them, plunging the facade into shadow. But not before Joanne paused at the threshold, her head turning slightly toward the darkness where they hid. It was a glance, fleeting as a breath, but loaded with the weight of shared secrets. "She's in," Lena murmured over the comms, her voice a thread in the night. "No lights on yet. He's pacing, saw it in the window silhouette." Jax grunted, shifting on his bike. We pull back. Can't spook him here. Get eyes inside tomorrow. Maybe that neighbor who owes you, Lena. Brett nodded, though doubt gnawed at him like road vibration. Patience was the creed, but every minute Joanne spent behind those walls felt like a ticking fuse. He gunned the engine softly, leading the retreat to a nondescript motel on the city's frayed edge, where the Iron Promise kept a room under a false name. The neon vacancy sign buzzed overhead as they parked, the lot empty save for a stray cat slinking through puddles. Inside, the air was stale with the scent of cheap cleaner and faded dreams, the walls papered in faded florals that peeled at the corners. Brett dropped his jacket over a chair, the leather sighing as it settled, and sank onto the sagging bed, rubbing the stubble along his jaw. They gathered around a scarred table, maps unrolled like battle plans, coffee steaming from styrofoam cups that tasted of regret. Jax traced a route with a calloused finger. Precinct's his den. Shifts start at 6. I'll take the dawn watch, blend with the delivery trucks. You hit the bar crowd after, Brett. See if his name stirs dirt. Lena scrolled her phone, the screen's glow casting hollows under her eyes. Mara texted back. Clinic's seen her twice this month. Accidental falls, she says. Notes buried, but Mara's got copies. Says Joanne's got a kid too, a boy, maybe 8. Stays with a sitter during Harlan's rages. We loop in child services quiet? No, too risky. Systems his playground. The words landed like stones in still water, rippling through Brett. A kid. The image sharpened Joanne's fear into something visceral, a mother's quiet terror that no badge could justify. He'd lost his own family to shadows like this. A brother taken too young by a father's hidden demons, a vow born in the silence of a graveside that he'd carry to his last mile. We build the case first, he said, voice steady as forged steel, proof that sticks, witnesses, patterns. Then we ride to her, offer the out. Dawn crept in grey and reluctant, painting the motel's curtains in muted tones. Brett stepped out for air, the chill biting through his shirt, the first birdsong a fragile counterpoint to the night's residue. His phone vibrated, a burner text from an unknown number. Thank you. He's asleep. Please, don't let him find us. Joanne. How she'd gotten the number he didn't question. The club's network was a web of quiet lifelines. He typed back, "Hold steady, we're here." Simple words, but they carried the weight of the promise, the Iron Promise's unspoken code. Family chosen, oaths unbreakable. By mid-morning, the pieces began to shift. Jax radioed from the precinct stakeout. Harlan barking orders in the bullpen, his laugh too loud, masking the tremor in his hands. Lena met a contact at a greasy spoon diner, steam rising from plates of eggs and hash as she traded whispers over coffee. The bartender from Elmwood had seen it before. Harlan's episodes, complaints from ex-partners that vanished like smoke. One name surfaced, Riley, a former beat cop who'd quit after crossing Harlan, now running a garage on the south side. He'll talk, Lena reported back, sliding into the motel's room with a folder of scribbled notes. For the right reasons. Lost a sister to a guy like that. Badge didn't save her. Brett absorbed it all, the puzzle-forming edges sharp enough to cut. They moved as one that afternoon, bikes humming through back roads to Riley's shop, the clang of tools and hiss of welders greeting them like old friends. Riley was wiry, grease-streaked, eyes wary under a ball cap. "Heard about the avenue," he said, wiping hands on a rag that smelled of oil and solvent. "Pierce? He's rotten core, covered for a buddy's assault last year. Girl ended up in the wind. Department's got his back. But the truth, it festers." Over the next hours, Riley spilled dates, names, a ledger of buried reports that painted Harlan as a predator in uniform. Brett listened, committing it to memory, the air thick with the scent of rubber and metal shavings. No recordings, too hot, but the words etched deep, fuel for the fire they were stoking. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the bays, Brett clasped Riley's shoulder. "You just honored your own promise, brother." Back on the road, the convoy reformed, engines sinking in a low growl that vibrated through bone and resolve. They didn't charge, they circled, tightening the noose with precision, born of shared scars. Evening found them at the rusty anchor again, the jukebox spinning tales of redemption under the haze of cigarette ghosts. Joanne's text lingered in Brett's pocket like a talisman, a reminder that some whispers demanded action, not thunder. Harlan's cruiser passed the bar's window once, oblivious, but the net was closing, silent, inexorable. Night fell heavy, stars pricking the velvet sky as Brett rode solo to a vantage near the bungalow. The house was dark, save for a faint glow in an upper window, Joanne's room perhaps, where a child slept unaware. He waited, the wind whispering through the hedges, carrying the faint echo of a television's murmur. Then, movement. The front door creaking open, Harlan stepping out for a smoke, his silhouette tense, scanning the empty street. Brett melted deeper into shadow, pulse steady. This wasn't the end, it was the gathering storm, where loyalty forged paths through corruption's maze. A soft cry pierced the quiet, muffled from inside. Harlan froze, then cursed under his breath, stomping back in. Brett's fists clenched on the handlebars, the old vow surging like adrenaline. He wouldn't storm in, not yet. But as the door slammed, he throttled away, the road unfurling toward allies and evidence. The unraveling had begun, thread by thread, pulling toward a dawn where justice, long deferred, would rise unbidden. Joanne's spark would not flicker out. The iron promise ensured it, bound by promises that outlasted the dark. The gravel crunched under Brett Sableheart's boots as he dismounted in the dim glow of Riley's garage, the air thick with the acrid bite of welding torches and the low hum of fluorescent bulbs flickering overhead. Dawn had barely broken over Riverton's south side, painting the sky in bruised purples and golds, but sleep was a luxury Brett had traded for vigilance. The cry from the bungalow last night echoed in his ears, a child's muffled sob, cut short by Harlan's heavy tread, fueling the fire that simmered beneath his calm exterior. The iron promise wasn't about charging into flames blind, it was about striking true, honoring the quiet vows that bound them like rivets in steel. Riley emerged from the bay, wiping sweat from his brow with a forearm smeared in grease, his eyes sharp despite the early hour. "You back already? Thought you'd let it simmer." He glanced at Jax and Lena, who flanked Brett like shadows, their bikes lined up in a silent phalanx. The garage smelled of motor oil and fresh welds, tools scattered like the remnants of old battles on the concrete floor. "Simmerings for coffee," Brett replied, his voice a low rumble that carried the weight of unsaid promises. "That ledger you mentioned, any copies? We need more than words to crack his shell." Riley hesitated, then nodded toward a cluttered office at the rear, its door ajar like an invitation to buried truths. Inside, the space was a chaos of file cabinets and yellowed papers, the air stale with dust and the faint metallic tang of ink. He pulled a drawer, fishing out a battered notebook bound in cracked leather. Not official, my own tallies, dates, shifts, the girls who came through here shaking after his patrols. One went missing last spring. Department called it a runaway. Bull. Harlan leaned on her. Hard. I logged what I could, off books. Risky, but oaths like yours? They stick. Brett flipped through the pages, the handwriting jagged. Entries sparse but damning. Timestamps of late-night calls ignored, names crossed out like ghosts. A photo clipped to one sheet showed a young woman, eyes hollow, bruises blooming under makeup, echoes of Joanne's hidden marks. His jaw tightened, the old scar along his ribcage itching like a reminder of his own buried losses. A brother's grave under desert stars, a promise whispered over dog tags. Stand for the ones who can't. This notebook was ammunition, not bullets, the kind that pierced armor without a shot. Lena scanned it beside him, her medic's precision noting patterns. Correlates with Mara's clinic logs. 3 visits for Joanne alone, plus the boy. Fractures, playground accidents. We tie this to witnesses. It paints the picture. Jax grunted approval, his limp echoing softly as he paced the narrow room. Precinct's got a soft underbelly. Internal Affairs Guy Keller owes the club from a roadside fix last year. I'll lean on him quiet. No waves. They rode out as the sun climbed. Engines purring through industrial backstreets where factories belched steam like weary breaths. Brett's mind mapped the next move. Reach Joanne without Harlan's shadow falling. The burner in his pocket had gone silent since her text, but trust was a fragile bridge, built mile by mile. They split at a crossroads, Jax toward the precinct's maze of chain link and concrete, Lena to the clinic for Mara's full handover, leaving Brett solo, the road unfurling toward the bungalow's quiet menace. The neighborhood stirred lazily under midday light, lawns patchy and fences sagging, the kind of place where secrets festered behind drawn curtains. Brett parked a block away, blending his bike behind a rusted van, and approached on foot, the sun warming his leather like a hesitant ally. The house loomed, its windows dark despite the hour, the front yard choked with weeds that whispered against his jeans. He knocked lightly, 3 raps deliberate, heart steady, but senses alert to every creak. The door cracked open, chain rattling like a warning. Joanne's face appeared, pale and drawn, her hair tousled as if sleep had been a stranger. The boy's voice called from inside, soft and curious. "Mom!" She glanced back, then met Brett's eyes, a flicker of recognition cutting through the fear. "You!" she breathed, unhooking the chain with trembling fingers. "How did you—" "Doesn't matter. We're making moves." He stepped inside, the door clicking shut behind him, sealing them in a world of faded wallpaper and the faint scent of yesterday's coffee. The living room was sparse, a sagging couch. Toys scattered like forgotten hopes. The boy, Timmy, 8 and wide-eyed, peering from the hallway, clutching a stuffed bear worn thin at the edges. Joanne led him to the kitchen, her movements quick, glancing at windows as if expecting Harlan's cruiser to materialize. He left for shift, said he'd be late, paperwork, but he watches everything. She poured water from a pitcher, hands unsteady, the glass clinking against the counter. "Last night. Timmy heard. I told him it was a bad dream." Brett nodded, pulling a chair, his bulk filling the space without overwhelming it. "We've got pieces, logs, witnesses, not enough to bury him yet, but close. You don't have to stay in this cage." He slid a slip of paper across the table, a number, an address, the motel's safe line. "When you're ready, the club's got your back. No strings, just the promise." Her eyes welled, but she blinked it away, steeling herself. "I thought about running before, packed once when he was on nights. But the boy, and the department, they'd find us, paint me the liar." Timmy wandered in then, climbing onto her lap, his small hand tracing the bruise on her wrist, a purple shadow fading, but not forgotten. Brett's chest tightened. The kid's innocence was a mirror to his own shattered youth, vows forged in the ruins. "You won't run alone," Brett said softly, voice like gravel over silk. "We build the case, go public clean. Truth's our ride." Timmy looked up, curious. "Are you a cowboy, mister? Like in stories?" Brett managed a half smile, ruffling the boy's hair. "Something like that, kid, keeping promises." The moment hung, fragile, until a car door slammed outside. Too soon for Harlan, but Joanne froze, ushering them toward the back. "Go." Through the alley. She pressed the notebook copy into his hand, her own hurried notes scrawled in margins. "I kept these hidden, for if—" Her whisper trailed, eyes fierce with the spark of rebellion. Brett slipped out, melting into the hedges, the paper burning in his pocket like contraband fire. The alley spat him onto the street, bike roaring to life as he evaded the neighbor's glance. Back at the motel by afternoon, the pieces converged. Jax's whisper from Keller confirmed buried complaints. Lena's envelope from Mara detailed medical scars. Joanne's notes sealed it, dates matching Riley's ledger, a timeline of control and cruelty. As shadows lengthened, Brett stood on the motel's balcony, the city sprawling below like a tangled web. Harlan's cruiser prowled a distant avenue, oblivious to the noose tightening. The cry from last night replayed, but now it fueled resolve, not rage. This was redemption's slow burn. Loyalty weaving through corruption's cracks, honoring the voiceless with actions that echoed louder than thunder. The Iron Promise rode on, guardians of forgotten oaths, pulling Joanne toward light one shadowed step at a time. The sun dipped, casting the room in amber hues as they planned the next thread. An anonymous tip to a journalist contact. Clean and untraceable. Brett's phone buzzed. Joanne. Soon. For Timmy. He replied, "Hold the line." The promise held, unyielding as the road. If this tale of quiet courage is stirring something in you, smash that like button below. It helps spread these stories of honor and heart to those who need them most. The twilight haze settled over Riverton's underbelly like a velvet curtain, muting the clang of distant rail yards and the low growl of traffic on the elevated highway. Brett, sable heart, leaned against the motel's rusted railing, the metal cool under his palms, as the city's pulse throbbed faintly below, headlights streaking like fireflies in the gathering dusk. The burner phone rested heavy in his pocket, Joanne's last message, a quiet anchor. Soon. For Timmy. He'd replied with the creed's simplicity, but inside, the old promise churned like engine oil in a hot block. Years ago, under a merciless sun, he'd sworn to a brother fading in the sand that he'd never let the shadows claim another innocent. Harlan Pierce's bungalow, with its peeling facade and hidden cries, was that shadow now, personal, insidious, demanding more than thunder. Jax's truck rumbled into the lot first, gravel spitting under tires worn from endless patrols. He killed the engine, stepping out with a manila envelope tucked under his arm, his limp barely noticeable in the dim light. Lena followed on her bike, helmet dangling from the handlebars, her face etched with the focus of a surgeon mid-procedure. The air carried the faint brine of the nearby river, mingling with the motel's lingering scent of damp concrete and cheap takeout. They gathered in the room, the door clicking shut like a vault seal, the space shrinking around the table strewn with coffee rings and scribbled maps. "Keller came through," Jack said, sliding the envelope across the scarred wood. His voice was gravel-low, honed by years of commands whispered in foxholes. Internal affairs file, redacted, but enough cracks show. 2 complaints from last year, one from a dispatcher who quit after Harlan counseled her. Buried under insubordination. No follow-up. Brett cracked the seal, pages whispering like conspirators in the lamplight. Grainy photocopies, time-stamps of ignored domestics, a witness statement from a neighbor who'd heard shouts through thin walls. One entry chilled him, a report of Timmy's fall at school, flagged but dismissed as boyish roughhousing. The boy's face from the kitchen flashed in his mind. Wide eyes, trusting, clutching that threadbare bear like a shield. Joanne's notes from earlier meshed perfectly, her hurried script detailing the rages that followed Harlan's long shifts, the apologies that turned to threats. "This ties it," Brett murmured, tracing a date with his thumb. "Patterns don't lie. Now, the journalist." Lena nodded, pulling out her laptop, the screen's blue glow casting hollows on her features. Contacts Elena Voss, freelance, digs into badge scandals for the regional press. Met her at a veterans rally last year. She's clean, hates the cover-ups. I sent the prelims anonymous, burner email, routed through proxies. She bit, Once a meet, neutral ground, old mill by the tracks midnight. The plan unfolded in measured beats. Jax on overwatch, Lena handling the handoff, Brett as the face if needed, calm, unyielding, the iron promises quiet enforcer. No heroics, just the steady drip of truth eroding Harlan's fortress. Outside, the sky deepened to indigo, stars pricking through the urban smog like distant promises. Brett stepped onto the balcony again, lighting a rare smoke, the ember flaring orange against the encroaching night. The river's murmur carried faint echoes, perhaps a barge's horn, low and mournful, reminding him of roads travelled alone after losses that scarred deeper than skin. This fight for Joanne wasn't vengeance. It was redemption's echo, choosing family in the face of blood's betrayal. Midnight found them at the mill's skeletal remains, a relic of Riverton's industrial ghosts, chain-link fences sagging under vines and rust. The air hummed with the vibration of freight trains rumbling parallel, their whistles slicing the quiet like accusations. Brett parked in the shadows of a collapsed silo, the Harley's kickstand sinking into soft earth, scented with decay and wild grass. Jax melted into the tree line, binoculars glinting faintly, while Lena waited by the entrance, her silhouette sharp against the floodlit tracks. Elena arrived on foot, sensible shoes crunching gravel, a notebook clutched like armor under her coat. Mid-40s, with lines around her eyes from too many late nights chasing stories, she scanned the dark before approaching Lena. "You the source?" Her voice cut crisp, laced with skepticism honed by false leads. "Part of it," Lena replied, handing over a flash drive slim as a promise. "Everything's there, logs, statements, timelines. No names on our end, just the facts. Harlan Pierce, sergeant, predator, wife and kid in the crosshairs, departments shielding him." Eleanor's eyes narrowed, slotting the drive into her phone, scrolling under the faint beam of her screen. The train's roar swelled, drowning words, but her nod was approval. "This is solid, corroborates tips I've had. If it runs, it blows the lid, exposes the rot. But why now? Who's pushing?" Brett emerged then, steps deliberate, his presence a low thunder without the storm. "Someone who keeps oaths," he said, voice carrying over the fading rumble. "The kind that outlast badges. She asked for help, we're giving it quiet, no spectacle, just truth." Elena studied him, the mill's windmill creaking overhead like a weary sentinel. "Bikers? Iron Promise, right? Heard the rep? Loyal to a fault." She paused, the drive vanishing into her pocket. "I'll verify, run it through channels. If it's clean, it prints next week. But if he catches wind—" "He won't," Brett assured, though the lie tasted bitter. Harlan's paranoia was a live wire. One slip, and the bungalow's walls could close like jaws. They parted with nods, Elena vanishing into the night as swiftly as she'd come, her footsteps fading into the crunch of leaves. Back on the road, the convoy reformed under a sliver of moon, engines sinking in a rhythm that vibrated through Brett's bones. The motel loomed ahead, but a detour pulled him. The bungalow, just to check the perimeter. He split off, Jax's taillight winking farewell in the rearview. The neighborhood slept under sodium glow, houses huddled like secrets, the air still carrying the day's warmth laced with cut grass and distant barbecues. He cut the engine a block out, approaching silent as shadow, boots soft on dew-kissed pavement. The house was dark, but a faint light seeped from the kitchen window. Joanne, perhaps, unable to rest. Brett crouched behind the hedges, heart steady when movement stirred, the back door easing open, Timmy slipping out with a flashlight beam dancing like fireflies. The boy froze, beam landing on Brett's form, eyes widening not in fear, but wonder. "Mr. Cowboy," Timmy whispered, voice a thread in the hush. He clutched the bear tighter, pajamas rumpled. Bare feet chilled on the step. Brett rose slowly, hands open, palms up. "Hey, kid, couldn't sleep?" Timmy nodded, glancing back. "Mum's inside, Dad's not home yet. She said you're helping." He stepped closer, the light trembling. Like a secret club? Something like that. Brett knelt, eye level, the scent of childhood, soap and earth, cutting through the night's damp. Your mum's strong, Timmy, braver than most. We're just making sure she stays that way. The boy smiled faintly, a crack in the fear. Can I ride your bike someday? When I'm big? Brett chuckled low, ruffling the hair again. Deal. But first, get back in. Tell her we're close. Timmy scampered inside, door latching soft, leaving Brett in the quiet. But as he turned, headlights swept the street. Harlan's cruiser, early, prowling like a shark, scenting blood. Brett dove into the shadows, pulse spiking, the engine's growl idling low as Harlan scanned the block. The cop's face, illuminated briefly, twisted in suspicion, but he drove on, tires hissing on asphalt. Close, too close. Brett waited, breath held, until the taillights dissolved. Mounting up, he throttled away. The road, a black ribbon under stars that seemed to watch. At the motel, Jax and Lena waited, faces taut. Tips in motion, Lena said. Voss confirmed receipt. But Harlan's circling. Keller says he's sniffing inquiries. Brett nodded, the night's brush with exposure sharpening the edge. We tighten, no more house visits. She texts if it heats. The room fell silent. The weight of oaths pressing like the river's current, unseen but relentless. Joanne's spark burned brighter now, fueled by a child's trust and evidence stacking like storm clouds. The unraveling accelerated, loyalty's quiet forge hammering justice from corruption's dross. Dawn would bring the next thread, but for now the promise held, binding them against the gathering gale. The first light of dawn filtered through the motel's threadbare curtains like a hesitant intruder, casting long shadows across the room where Brett, sable heart, sat unmoving, elbows on knees, staring at the burner phone's blank screen. The air hung heavy with the remnants of night, stale coffee grounds, and the faint metallic tang of tension that clung to everything after a close call. Outside, Riverton's streets stirred to life, a distant delivery truck's rumble, the sharp cry of gulls wheeling over the river, the world pretending normalcy, while the noose around Harlan Pierce tightened imperceptibly. Brett's scar itched again, a phantom pull from old wounds, reminding him that patience wasn't passivity. It was the slow grind of gears in a machine built for endurance. Jax paced the narrow space, his boot heels thudding softly on the worn carpet, each step a punctuation to his unease. Harlan's on edge. Keller says he's pulling strings, grilling dispatch on leaks. If Voss's story hits, it'll be fireworks, but we need Joanne clear first. Lena nodded from the corner, packing her laptop with methodical care, her fingers lingering on the flash drive's empty slot. The room smelled of her herbal tea, a grounding note amid the storm's prelude. They'd spent the pre-dawn hours refining contingencies, escape routes mapped in red ink, a safe house prepped on the city's rural fringe, with a contact who owed the club from a desert run years back. No grand exodus, just a quiet slip into the ether, honoring the vow that family, chosen or blood, deserved shadows lifted. Brett's phone buzzed then, jolting the quiet like a starter pistol. Joanne's text. He's home early, asking questions. Timmy's scared. Need out now. The words hit like a gut punch, simple and stark, painting the bungalow's walls closing in. He showed the screen, the group's resolve snapping taut. We move. Jax, you and Lena on the extract. Back way, no lights. I'll draw his eye if needed. Plans shifted in murmurs, the air thickening with the scent of impending rain as clouds gathered overhead, mirroring the fracture lines in Harlan's facade. They rolled out in staggered formation, bikes humming low through the awakening streets, the morning mist veiling their path like a conspirator's cloak. Brett led at a distance, his Harley, a silent predator skirting the neighborhood's edges, the engine's vibrations syncing with his pulse. The bungalow came into view, its facade unchanged, peeling paint, overgrown yard, but tension radiated from it like heat from an idling exhaust. Harlan's cruiser sat crooked in the drive, as if abandoned in haste, the front door ajar like a wound. Brett killed his engine a block away, boots hitting pavement with a soft crunch, the air alive with the chirp of waking birds and the faint, acrid whiff of cigarette smoke lingering from the porch. He approached on foot, senses attuned to every rustle, leaves skittering in the breeze, a dog's distant bark echoing off quiet homes. The neighborhood slumbered on, oblivious, its picket fences and flower boxes a mocking veneer over hidden fractures. Peering through the hedges, Brett caught movement. Harlan's silhouette in the window, pacing, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand gesturing sharply. Joanne's voice filtered out, muffled but edged with steel. "I don't know anything, Harlan. Just get to work." Timmy's small form darted across the living room, bear in tow, his footsteps pattering like rain on tin. Brett signaled via text, clear for pickup, and waited, heart a steady drum. Minutes stretched, the sun climbing to burn off the mist, casting the scene in sharper relief. Then the back door eased open, Joanne emerging with Timmy clutched close, a duffel slung over her shoulder, her face pale but set with the quiet fire of decision. She scanned the yard, spotting Brett's shadow, and nodded once, urgent. Lena's van, borrowed from a club mechanic, unmarked and unassuming, glided into the alley, Jax at the wheel, his eyes scanning mirrors like a hawk. Joanne bundled Timmy in, the boy whispering questions that she hushed with a kiss to his forehead. The door slid shut, the van easing away without a sound, tires whispering over asphalt toward the fringe. Brett held position, a decoy in the open, his presence meant to snag Harlan's gaze if he emerged. The cop did, moments later, storming onto the porch, eyes bloodshot, scanning the street with the paranoia of a cornered animal. "Joanne!" he bellowed, voice cracking the morning hush, drawing a neighbor's curtain twitch. He spotted Brett then, leaning casual against a lamppost, arms crossed, the iron promise patch a deliberate flag. "You!" Harlan snarled, descending the steps, his off-duty shirt untucked, badge clipped like a threat. The air between them crackled, charged with the scent of his sweat and unwashed fury. "What the hell are you doing here, biker? Been sniffing around my business?" Brett met his stare, unblinking, voice level as a horizon line. "Just passing through. Saw the door open, figured someone might need a hand." No aggression, just the calm weight of truth unspoken, the kind that eroded bluster like wind on stone. Harlan advanced, fists balled, but halted feet away, glancing back at the empty house, realization dawning like a slow poison. "Where is she? What did you do?" "She's choosing her road," Brett replied, stepping aside subtly, blocking the alley view. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, perhaps routine, perhaps not, but they hung in the air like a warning. Harlan lunged, grabbing Brett's jacket, the fabric bunching under his grip, breath hot with last night's liquor. "You think you can take what's mine? I'll bury you, club and all." Brett didn't resist, hands visible, voice dropping to a gravel whisper. "Oaths like mine don't break easy. Yours? They're cracking." He twisted free with a biker's economy, not striking but firm, enough to send Harlan stumbling back, face flushing crimson. The cop fumbled for his phone, dialing with shaking fingers, but Brett was already moving, mounting his bike in one fluid arc. The engine roared to life, a thunderclap that shook the quiet street, drawing stares from awakening homes. He throttled away, weaving through the grid, the wind whipping his beard, carrying the echo of Harlan's curses. Miles out, he rendezvoused at the safe house, a weathered cabin tucked in wooded hills, the river's murmur a soothing undercurrent to the pine's resinous scent. The van was there, Joanne and Timmy inside, the boy exploring the porch with wide-eyed wonder, Lena watching like a sentinel. Jax clapped Brett's shoulder as he dismounted, the air crisp with pine and relief. "Clean extract. She's holding." Joanne stepped forward, Timmy at her side, her eyes meeting Brett's with a gratitude deeper than words. "You came just like you said." The cabin's door creaked open, inviting them in. The space simple, a stone hearth, quilts folded neat, the faint aroma of stew simmering on a wood stove. No luxury, just sanctuary. The iron promise's gift, forged from shared scars. They settled in the fading light, plans evolving over mugs of hot brew. Voss's story was cued, evidence locked tight, but Harlan's rage would hunt. "He'll pull the department," Jax warned, tracing routes on a napkin. "We stay dark, rotations, no traces." Brett nodded, watching Timmy sketch bikes on scrap paper, the boys' laughter a balm against the storm. Joanne's hand found his briefly, a silent thanks. "For the first time I feel it. The promise." The word hung, binding them, as evening deepened, stars emerging like witnesses. The road ahead twisted, but loyalty's thread held firm, weaving redemption from the frayed edges of fear. Harlan's shadow loomed, but the light was breaking through, one unyielding mile at a time. The cabin's hearth crackled softly, flames dancing shadows across the rough-hewn walls, casting a warm glow that pushed back the encroaching chill of the wooded hills. The scent of pine sap mingled with the earthy aroma of simmering stew, a simple pot bubbling on the wood stove like a heartbeat in the quiet. Brett Sable Hart sat on the edge of a worn armchair, his leather jacket draped over the back, the iron promise patch catching the firelight like a badge of its own. Across from him, Joanne Pierce cradled Timmy on her lap, the boy's head resting against her shoulder, his small fingers tracing patterns in the quilt's faded threads. Exhaustion etched lines around her eyes, but there was a lightness now, a subtle lift in her posture, as if the weight of hidden bruises had begun to ease. Jax leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, his silhouette broad and unyielding, while Lena stirred the pot with a wooden spoon, the rhythmic scrape grounding the room's fragile peace. Outside, the river whispered over smooth stones, a constant murmur underscoring the night's hush, broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl slicing through the pines. The extraction had been clean, but the air hummed with the aftermath's tension, Harlan's curses still echoing in Brett's ears, the cop's grip on his jacket a phantom pressure. "He'll come hunting," Jack said, voice low and gravelly, like tires on loose gravel. "Department's his pack. But Voss's piece drops tomorrow, front page, if she pushes it." Joanne nodded, her gaze fixed on the flames. Timmy's breathing even in sleep. "I never thought it had come to this, leaving like a thief in my own life." Her words carried the tang of regret, but laced with resolve. The kind forged in too many shadowed mornings. Brett met her eyes, seeing the spark he'd glimpsed on Elmwood Avenue, the one that had pulled him from his solitary ride into this fray. "You didn't steal anything," he replied, his tone steady as forged iron. "You claimed what's yours, freedom, for you, for him." He nodded toward the boy, the gesture heavy with the vows of men who'd chosen kin over solitude. The burner phone on the table vibrated once, sharp in the quiet, a text from Elena Voss. "Story locked, printing at dawn, stay dark." Brett exhaled, the knot in his chest loosening a fraction. The evidence they'd fed her. Riley's ledger, Mara's clinic notes, Joanne's hidden scrawls. Keller's buried files, wove a tapestry too tight for denial, patterns of control, ignored cries, a badge twisted into a chain, no graphic scars detailed, just the inexorable truth. Harlan Pierce, sergeant turned tyrant, shielded by a system that prized loyalty over light. The iron promise had moved like smoke through cracks, honoring the old oath from desert sands, where Brett had lost a brother to unseen enemies. This was that promise's echo, quiet actions rippling into justice's tide. Dawn broke slow and golden, filtering through the cabin's lace curtains like spilled honey, painting the wooden floors in warm stripes. The group stirred early, coffee brewing strong and black, its bitter steam cutting the pine-scented air. Timmy woke with a yawn, rubbing his eyes, the stuffed bear tumbling to the rug as he bounded to the window, pressing his nose to the glass. "Look, Mum." "Dear!" Joanne smiled, a genuine curve that softened the hollows of her cheeks, pulling him into a hug that smelled of soap and safety. Lena packed provisions, canned goods, fresh clothes from a club drop, her movements efficient, a medic's grace masking the warrior beneath. Brett stepped onto the porch, the wood creaking under his boots, the morning mist rising from the river like ghosts dispersing. His Harley waited in the tree line, dew beading on the chrome, the engine's promise of open road a siren call. But first, the watch. Jax joined him, handing over binoculars, their lenses fogged briefly from the chill. Patrols on the highway, routine, but he's stirring the hive, radio chatters hot. Below, the dirt road wound through the hills, empty save for a rabbit darting across, its fur fluffed against the cool air. The city lay miles distant, a smudge on the horizon, but Harlan's reach felt closer, a shadow lengthening with the sun. By noon, the news broke. Voss's article hitting digital feeds first, then the stands, headlines screaming in bold, Riverton sergeant exposed, years of abuse buried under badge. The words painted no gore, just the cold facts. Complaints vanished. Victims silenced, a family fractured by unchecked power. Joanne read it on Lena's tablet, her hand trembling over Timmy's eyes, the boy's curiosity pulling him close. "It's over," she whispered, tears tracing clean paths down her face, unhidden for the first time. The story named Harlan, quoted anonymized sources, called for review. The system's own hand turning against its rot. The backlash hit like a storm front. Sirens wailed in the distance by afternoon, not hunting them, but converging on the precinct. Jax's contact confirmed. Harlan in cuffs, bellowing denials in the bullpen, his partner turning state's evidence to save his skin. Internal affairs swarmed, the code cracking under the flood of light. No raid on the cabin, just the slow unraveling, justice poetic in its patience, born from whispers and ledgers rather than fists. Brett watched the feeds on the cabin's old radio, static, crackling like applause, the announcer's voice grave. Pierce faces suspension pending investigation, victims' advocates call for reform. As evening fell, the group rode out in convoy, engines purring through the twilight, the river's gleam a silver thread beside the road, Joanne and Timmy in the van, Lena at the wheel, heading north to a fresh start. A relative's farm, far from Riverton's grasp, the iron promise footing the miles. Brett flanked them, wind whipping his face, the scent of wildflowers and exhaust a balm. Jax peeled off at the fork, bound for club business, a nod exchanged. Brothers in oath, scars shared. At the farm's gate, under a sky bruised with stars, Joanne stepped out, Timmy waving from the porch light's glow. "You kept your word," she said to Brett, her voice carrying over the idling engines, eyes shining with the dawn of possibility. He clasped her hand briefly, the calluses rough against her skin. "We all did. Family's what you build, not what's given." Timmy ran up, hugging Brett's leg. "Thanks, cowboy. Ride safe." The convoy faded into the night, taillights winking like fireflies, the road unfurling toward horizons unbound. Brett throttled harder, the vibration thrumming through him, washing away the night's residue. Redemption wasn't a blaze, it was this, the quiet fulfillment of promises that outlasted storms, binding chosen kin against the dark. Harlan's fall was the echo, but Joanne's rise the true legacy, a spark carried on leather and chrome, proving honor's road never truly ends. Thank you for riding along on this journey of unbreakable oaths and quiet justice. If stories like Brett's stir your soul, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. We've got more tales of redemption and chosen family thundering your way.